So I don't know if you guys are aware, but Kamala Harris is on a media tour. She has been on The View. She was on a podcast called Call Her Daddy, which I had never heard of until the other day. But apparently it's a very popular podcast. She was just on 60 Minutes. We're going to start with this interview on 60 Minutes. And I'm going to show you one of the responses that she gave today on The View. For those who may be still on the fence, I want people to get off the fence. I want you to vote against genocide. The gentleman who interviewed Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes. This guy really, I will give him props for pushing back because she has a tendency to not answer questions. And you're going to see that throughout this interview. This is probably the toughest interview I've seen her have. So let's go ahead and can we give him props? Let's give him some props. Let's go ahead and dive in. Oh, boy.
The events of the past few weeks have pushed us to the brink, if not into, an all-out regional war in the Middle East. What can the U.S. do at this point to stop this from spinning out of control?
Well, let's start with October 7. 1,200 people were massacred.
So has everybody noticed the same script? You know the script by now? Let's start with October 7th. They always want you to know that it started with October 7th. I'm going to debunk that in just a second.
250 hostages were taken, including Americans. Women were brutally raped.
Still repeating that lie. Still repeating that lie.
And as I said then, I maintain Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters.
Same script. Same script. Kamala Harris is a script. This woman never says anything different about this issue. It's the same script that she's reading from over and over again. So I'm hoping people are paying attention to that. Is my lighting too bright? Let me see. Should I turn this one off? Is that too bright? Should I turn this one off? Is that too bright? We'll see. Let's continue.
Too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. This war has to end.
We supply Israel with...
Pause. We'll come back to supplying Israel. Let's debunk it started on October 7th. Shout out to Margaret Kimberly because she's doing the damn thing. Look at the year. It didn't start last October. Check this out, guys. This is from the New York Times. This was published June 20th, 1899. 1899 on a Tuesday. Conference of Zionists elect delegates at their meeting in Baltimore. Will colonize Palestine. Rabbi Gothel and Wise were chosen members of the International Executive Committee. Don't believe me? Look at this. Baltimore, Maryland, June 19th, the first business at today's session of the annual conference of Federation of American Zionists. That's what it was called back then. Was the election of 2 members from America to serve on the executive committee of the International Congress, which will assemble on August 15th. So this was published 1819. That's right, Lee. Let's do it, Lee. Okay, then let's start with 1819. Exactly. So you see, Kamala Harris doesn't want you to see this. They don't want you to know, that the internet exists, basically. So you can tell these people are actors.
Billions of dollars in military aid. And yet Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Oh, sorry, 1899. Did I say 1819? 1899. So he's asking her, does the U.S. have no sway over Benjamin Netanyahu? I'm going to show you her response here. And then I'm going to show you her full response because somehow along the way, they edited this. So this interview, again, not a live interview. So they're going to show you the part of her response that makes her look good, but they're not going to show you the full response. I'm going to show you the full response. So let's go back just a little bit here.
Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles.
But it seems...
Pause. So, number one, she didn't answer the question. The question is, does the U.S. have any sway over Benjamin Netanyahu, right? So she didn't answer that question, but also for some reason they edited that part of her response. So I'm just going to show you her full answer and then we'll get back to that interview because this is important. This is what she really said.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems...
So notice how they edited that answer and they showed you the part that made Kamala Harris look better, that made her look good. So what that tells you is that even 60 Minutes realized that she did not have a good response to that question. So do you see how once again, and I told you guys this over and over, do you see how once again, corporate media is trying to make Kamala look better than she actually does? And this is just one of the tricks that they've been doing along the way. Let's record these interviews and say they're live, but they're not actually live. And then we can edit her responses because she's not doing a good job with the responses. Everybody catch that? All right, let's continue.
That Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
So you see this? Trying to make her look better than she actually does. Why did they edit that response?
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And
so the answer to that question is no. We don't have a real ally in Benjamin Netanyahu. And Kamala Harris knows the answer is no. That's why she changed the question. So now she's trying to change it to, instead of Netanyahu, it's about the Israeli people. So now she can say yes, right? There have been a number of congressmen in the Democratic Party that have criticized Netanyahu openly in corporate media, but Kamala Harris is afraid to do that. Why is she afraid to do that? Who was Kamala Harris taking donations from? The Israeli lobby. So, of course, she's going to try to find, let me back out of this in a certain way. And so let me change the question to make it about the Israeli people and not about Benjamin Netanyahu.
the answer to that question is yes. And
while the war in the Middle East has dominated recent headlines, it's the economy that most concerns American voters this election year, as always.
There are lots of signs that the American economy is doing very well, better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
we now have historic low unemployment in America among.
Again, the question is, Are the people wrong for blaming her and Joe Biden? That's the question. It's a yes or no question. And like, you know, when I studied broadcast journalism, they taught us not to ask as many closed-ended questions. So a closed-ended question is something that you can answer with a yes or no. They told us to ask open-ended questions, right? So oftentimes what you'll see politicians do, instead of having to say yes or no to a closed-ended question, they'll try to, let's do some word salad and let's talk about something else so I don't have to say yes or no. But it's a valid question. Are the American people wrong for blaming you and Joe Biden for this current economy that we have? That's the question.
All groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries. But
pause. What did I tell you guys, right? What did I tell you? A lot of the things that Kamala Harris is running on that she says she's going to do, she needs it to pass in Congress first. So right now, the Republicans have the House. I don't see them passing this bill. And then it still has to get through the Senate, right? Right now, the races for the Senate, the Republicans have 50. The Democrats have 44, and there's 6 seats that are up in the air. So let's go ahead and give the Democrats all those 6 seats, which I don't think will happen, but let's just see if it does. Give them all those 6 seats. Now you got 50-50. So now you have a tie again, right? So now you need a tiebreaker and et cetera. And we didn't been through this before. We went through this with the Biden administration. So Kamala Harris is making promises to the American people that she really can't do via executive order. This is the difference between her and Jill Stein's campaign. With Jill Stein's campaign, she's telling people, this is what I will do on day one with executive order. Kamala Harris isn't doing that. Kamala is selling you a bunch of, fluffy cupcakes. And it sounds good, but she's not telling people that she can't do those things without it passing Congress and the Senate. And then she can sign those things into law. But the reality is, does Kamala Harris actually plan on doing those things? No, I don't think she does. I don't think we've seen this before. So her whole plan was to just run on not being Donald Trump. But then she started to realize, oh, wait a minute, people are really angry about the economy. I got to give them something. Remember, she had no platform for almost 40 days, no platform, because she was just running on, I'm not Donald Trump. And so you see what is happening. So watch the interviewer here, because he pushes her on this. Let me go back just a little bit.
With it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries, but details are yet to be defined.
You want to expand the child tax credit.
Yes, I do.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
And people starting small businesses.
Correct.
But it is
now it's tax breaks. What happened to the $25,000 down payment? You see how she keeps changing the language? 1 minute it's $25,000 down payment. The next minute is $25,000 tax credit. Everyone pay attention to this stuff.
Estimated by the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget that your economic plan would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. How are you going to pay for that?
Okay, so the other economists that have reviewed my plan versus my opponent and determined that my economic plan would strengthen America's economy, his would weaken it. But my plan, Bill, if you don't mind, my plan is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
When she says that her plan is backed by economists, she's referring to former BlackRock executives that she made a part of her economic team. So just keep in mind, that's who she's referring to. Okay. Like we should really trust these people.
But pardon me, Madam Vice President. The question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, one of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes.
Now, how would I have answered this question? I want to show you the difference, right? Because that is always a common question. How are you going to pay for it, right? You know what I would have said? I would have said, well, you know what? First, we're going to cut this bloated defense budget. That's how we're going to pay for some of these things. We're going to cut this bloated defense budget, and that's how we're going to do it. Because we have billions for Ukraine, billions for Israel, but nothing when it comes to the American people. We got to give them crumbs. We want to give people in Asheville, North Carolina, $750 or up to $750, but we can give Ukraine and Israel billions of dollars. That's how I would have answered that question. Now, she's not going to answer that question that way. Why? Because again, she's trying to win over moderate Republicans. She already said she wants to put a Republican in her cabinet. She's trying to hang along with Goldman Sachs. You know, she wants to defend the weapon contractors. She wants to continue to give Israel weapons. That's why she can't tell you what I just told you. I mean, it's a layup.
It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations. And I plan on making that fair.
But
listen to the jobs that she always mentions, right? Listen to the occupations, teachers, nurses, and firefighters. Although a real shout out to all those people that do those professions. But it's really interesting because, again, like I told you, notice they never mention people who are lower income. They're not mentioning these types of jobs, like the people who are, you know, working at, I always bring up Dunkin' Donuts, but the people who are working at Dunkin' Donuts, cashiers, retail employees. The average middle-aged woman in the United States is working in a restaurant or they're working retail. And they never bring up these jobs. They never bring up sales associate, cashier, waitress. Never. They just bring teachers, nurses, and firefighters. Pay attention to that.
Dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
There it is.
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses. Their constituents are middle-class, hardworking folks.
And Congress has shown...
Let's go back a little bit. Listen to this one more time. One more time.
It pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
And it's not fair. It's not fair. But isn't that something that Bernie Sanders was saying in 2016 campaign and his 2020 campaign? So here's Kamala Harris trying to pull things once again from the Bernie Sanders campaign to make herself kind of appear to be progressive, even though we know for reals that she's not. And when Bernie Sanders was saying those things, didn't the Democratic Party like rail against him and say, oh, no, that's socialism. Don't start talking about that. But now it's OK for Kamala Harris to say it. OK, listen again.
And I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
How will you get it through Congress? Because he knows that she can't. Republicans have control of the House, even if, let's switch it. Let's say this year, Democrats gain control of the House again. Okay, let's say it changes. How are you going to get it through the Senate? If you look at most of the plans that Kamala Harris has, these are things that have to get through Congress. So again, she don't have details. She don't really know. Kamala's just coming up with stuff and like, oh yeah, well, I'll sign it because it sounds good. You know, it makes people feel good and warm and fuzzy and gives them hope and things like that. But the reality is, how are you going to get it through? How?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses. Their constituents are middle-class, hardworking folks.
So Congress has been known to not support their constituents and still get reelected. How do you guys think Lindsey Graham continues to win? Congress has been known to go against what their constituents want and just do for their donor base and still get elected.
Congress has shown no inclination to move in your direction.
I disagree with you. There are plenty of leaders in Congress who understand and know that the Trump tax cuts blew up our federal deficit. None of us, and certainly I cannot afford to be myopic in terms of how I think about strengthening America's economy.
If you had such a problem with Donald Trump's tax cuts, why did the Biden-Harris administration continue to support some of Trump's tax cuts? So this is another question we continue to push back. But he's correct. It's not going to get through Congress. And she said we have many leaders. She's talking about Hakeem Jeffries because he's the minority speaker of the House. So she's talking about him. So just him alone? Just Hakeem Jeffries is going to make this happen when it's a Republican House?
Let me tell you something. I am a devout public servant. You know that. I am also a capitalist.
There we go.
And I know the limitations of government.
Kamala Harris is.
Remember when Elizabeth Warren said that? Unlike Bernie, I'm a capitalist.
Been in government for decades. She was first elected San Francisco District Attorney in 2003, then California Attorney General. She went on to the U.S. Senate and now Vice President.
A quarter of registered voters still say they don't know you. They don't know what makes you tick. And why do you think that is? What's the disconnect?
Here it comes.
It's an election, Bill. And I take it seriously that I have to earn everyone's vote. This is an election for President of the United States. No one should be able to take for granted that they can just declare themselves a candidate and automatically receive support. You have to earn it. And that's what I intend to do.
Let's go back to what she just said here. The hypocrisy is hilarious.
Seriously, that I have to earn everyone's vote. This is an election for President of the United States. No one should be able to take for granted that they can just declare themselves a candidate and automatically receive support. You have to.
No one should be able to just declare themselves a candidate. No one voted for you. Like, I honestly, out of all the things I've heard her say in interviews, I was really shocked she said this one. I was floored. She said, no one can just declare themselves a candidate and then you have to earn it. That's what I intended. You were selected. Nobody voted for you in the Democratic primary. What are you talking about? I can't believe she said this one.
Earn it. And that's what I intend to do.
Let me tell you what your critics and the columnists say.
Okay.
They say that the reason so many voters don't know you is that you have changed your position on so many things.
Give it up for the host. Give it up for the host, fam. Can we give him a beat? Can we give him a beat? Let's drop him a beat. Hey, hey, to the rock away. Dance, rock away. Woo! We are giving all kind of shout outs to him because he's doing the damn thing. Doing the damn thing.
You were against fracking. Now you're for it. You supported looser immigration policies. Now you're tightening them up. You were for Medicare for all. Now you're not. So many that people don't truly know what you believe or what you stand for. And I know you've heard that.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. And it's not just because it's an election. You know, nobody said that about Bernie Sanders. We don't know you. Nobody said that about Joe Biden. We don't really know what you represent. Nobody said those things. They're saying it about you. No one said that about Obama. No one said this about, did people say this about Bill Clinton? No, they're saying it about you because, again, according to the host, what did he say? You flip-flop, boo. You're a flip-flopper. Flippity flop.
In the last 4 years, I have been Vice President of the United States, and I have been traveling our country, and I have been listening to folks and seeking what is possible in terms of common ground. I believe in building consensus. We are a diverse people, geographically, regionally, in terms of where we are in our backgrounds. And what the American people do want is that we have leaders who can build consensus, where we can figure out compromise and understand it's not a bad thing, as long as you don't compromise your values, to find common sense solutions. And that has been my approach.
That has nothing to do with you flippity floppy. You just go with whatever policy you think is going to be beneficial to you at that point in time. So when she was running in 2020, at that time, Medicare for All was a big part of the discussion, right? Maybe I should turn the slide back on. A big part of the discussion. So, of course, she was in favor of it until she got pushback from corporate media and other dim, establishment peeps. And then she decided, oh, no, I don't want to do Medicare for All. Yeah, you don't have any real principles. You just run on what you think people want to hear.
But one issue that has proven impervious to...
Oh, 1 second. Let's go ahead and fast forward just through here. Immigration. So now we're moving on to immigration. And this one's really interesting too. I don't know if she looked back on this issue at all. If she looked back on this interview in particular, let's go ahead and bring this part in here.
Recently visited the southern border and embraced President Biden's recent crackdown on asylum seekers. And that crackdown produced an almost immediate and dramatic decrease in the number of border crossings. If that's the right answer now, why didn't your administration take those steps in 2021?
Oh, do it again. Can we do it again? Let's give him a beat one more time. One more time. Hey, hey. Dance with me. Rock. Hey. All right, we'll let him get back to this discussion here. I'm sorry, but he's doing it. Here we go.
The first bill we proposed to Congress was to fix our broken immigration system, knowing that if you want to actually fix it, we need Congress to act. It was not taken up. Fast forward to a moment when a bipartisan group of members of the United States Senate, including one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, got together, came up with a border security bill. Well, guess what happened? Donald Trump got word that this bill was afoot and could be passed, and he wants to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. So he told his buddies in Congress, kill the bill, don't let it move forward.
But I've been covering the border for years. And so I know this is not a problem that started with your administration.
Correct.
But there was an historic flood of undocumented immigrants coming across the border the first 3 years of your administration. As a matter of fact, arrivals quadrupled from the last year of President Trump. Was it a mistake to loosen the immigration policies as much as you did?
Give it up for him. Give it up for him one more time. Because what he just said was that I understand that Donald Trump may have come in and found ways to block that bill getting through, right? Calling up his peeps in Congress and say, don't let it get through. Although there were other things that were part of that bill as well that she's not mentioning that I think people had issues with. But to his point, what were you doing before then? Why didn't you do anything those first 3 years that you were in office? Like, why didn't you do anything? Can we hear it again one more time?
Arrivals quadrupled from the last year of President Trump. Was it a mistake to loosen the immigration policies as much as you did?
It's
We're going to give him his
a
flowers.
long-standing problem. And solutions are at hand. And from day one, literally, we have been offering solutions.
But what I was asking was it a mistake to kind of allow that flood to happen in the first place?
I think
Oh, one more time. He said, let me explain to you the question I'm asking because you're not answering the question, fam. Hey. What you mean? We're giving him his props tonight. We are giving him his props tonight.
the policies that we have been proposing are about fixing a problem, not promoting a problem. Okay.
But the numbers did quadruple.
And the
under
numbers
your
today,
watch.
because of what we have done, we have cut the flow of illegal immigration by half.
But should you
We have
done
cut
that?
the
Should you
flow
have
of
done that?
fentanyl by half, but we need Congress to be able to act to actually fix the problem.
You have accused Donald Trump of using racist tropes when it comes to Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, when it comes to birtherism, when it comes to Charlottesville. In fact, you have called him a racist and divisive. Yet Donald Trump has the support of millions and millions of Americans. How do you explain that?
I'm glad you are pointing these comments.
Oh, I forgot about this one.
Tropes when it comes to Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, when it comes to birtherism, when it comes to Charlottesville. In fact, you have called him a racist and divisive. Yet Donald Trump has the support of millions and millions of Americans. How do you explain that?
That's a good question. How do you explain that? Sugar Free says, great question, right? Be Easy said, bro, it's coming with the heat. I know, this is wild. This is wild, fam. Oh my gosh.
I'm glad you are pointing these comments out that he has made that have resulted in a response by most reasonable people to say it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
With so many people supporting Donald Trump, the man you've called a racist, how do you bridge that seemingly unbridgeable gap?
I believe that the people of America want a leader who's not trying to divide us and demean. I believe that the American people recognize that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, it's based on who you lift up.
Oh, okay. So what does that mean in reference to your support for the state of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu? Because that's someone who's beating people down, beating down Palestinians, Lebanese people. But that's what you support. So you're full of it. And to go further, I told you again, she's on this press tour. She was also on The View. And I want you to hear something. This is really, this is French kiss. Listen to this. Would you have done anything differently than Biden in the last 4 years? Listen to this, guys.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Well,
so there you have it, folks. There is nothing that she would have done differently than Joe Biden. And she also, and I don't know if she should have said this part, but she also let everybody know that she has been a part of the decision-making plans for the past 4 years. So for all the people that told me she was the vice president, anything that happened under Biden is not her fault, she just let you know on The View that she was a part of decision-making ideas during the past 4 years. And she will not do anything different than so she said she would do nothing differently. So you know what that means, folks? Some of you who think you're getting something better by supporting Kamala Harris, you're just voting for a female Biden. So her hands are bloody just like Biden's. You can point fingers at her about the economy, just like you pointed fingers at Joe Biden. I mean, she didn't have to say all of that. The question simply was, would you have done anything differently than Joe Biden the past 4 years? She didn't have to go on and say, oh, I've been a part of the decision making. No.